I hopped from one foot to the other. My hands were shoved into my pockets, and my jacket hood was cinched tightly. This was all in a futile attempt to keep warm. There was abandoned fishing gear scattered around, and 2 shepherd dogs protectively barked at me. The sky was a brooding gray, and the wind whistled in my ears. It was 7 a.m. on a chilly April morning on the Pacific coast of northern Baja California, Mexico. I perched on the edge of a cliff at a remote artisanal fishing camp, staring out at the vast ocean below. I was attempting to imagine exactly how these fishermen maneuver their pangas twice a day down a narrow, steep dirt ramp with their pangas. I'd hoped to catch a local fisherman and ask him a series of questions about his line of work. But due to the high winds and the rough seas that day, there were no fishermen to be found. The weather and the large ocean swell were a stark reminder that fishing for a living in the remote stretches of the Baja California desert is not for the faint of heart. You see, the artisanal shark fishing industry is complicated. Conservation here requires a multidisciplinary approach to unravel it. And what I discovered in Baja California is a subtle but important shift in shark conservation. It was through deep understanding, compassion, and collaboration that fishermen and scientists are working together to protect both sharks and the people whose livelihoods depend on them the most. In order to understand the shark fishing in the region and understand shark conservation in the region, I needed to travel back in time just a bit to better understand the industry. So since the 1960s, shark meat has been a staple in Mexican diets, including the famous Baja fish taco. Many argue over the origin in Baja, but it's commonly agreed upon that the original taco was prepared using angel shark meat in a small, rustic stall next to the Mercado Negro in Ensenada. The use of shark was introduced to the region by Japanese fishermen. Soon after, shark quickly became an essential, low-cost source of protein for coastal communities and large cities throughout Mexico. Local vendors that I talked to while I was there, including taco stands, reported that there's been a dip in the demand for shark meat, and many are swapping out cazón, meaning smaller shark, for whitefish instead. I asked them why, and they said that consumers have complained about the taste of the shark meat, and they wanted something different. Fast forward just a bit to about a decade ago, a team of local scientists traveled throughout the Baja California Peninsula. They were collecting shark and ray data, such as species, gear type, fishing camp locations, and they found that most of the fishing camps throughout the region were targeting sharks in some capacity. So for my project, I wanted to explore the shark fisheries of today, and I wanted to informally interview the fishermen. I felt it was important to uplift the fishermen's voices, build capacity in Baja, and help understand shark conservation. With this information, I wrote an investigative journalism-style article in the first-person narrative using ArcGIS as my layout and my format. So over the course of 4 days, and 1 flat tire later, we traveled nearly 1,000 miles down long dirt roads to 8 different fishing camps, where I met with fishermen of all ages. I was both nervous and excited to talk to them. It's difficult to approach people you have never met and ask them in Spanish, which is a language I learned as a child but is quite rusty in my adult years, and ask them controversial and sometimes intimate and personal questions about their fishing experiences. However, the fishermen were incredibly polite. They explained their gear, their methods, their species type, all in great detail. I listened intently. I took detailed notes, and a fisherman in his 40s explained that rarely, if ever, they catch sharks because they use a method called hook and line with circle hooks, and it's a method that is known for being far more sustainable. The fishermen again shared that on a rare occasion they do catch a shark, usually a mako or a thresher shark. It's always incidental, and when they do, they keep it for themselves to cook and enjoy within their homes. I couldn't help but wonder, though, where are all these sharks? There was definitely a noticeable shift happening here, so I made it my mission to figure out where this behavioral change was coming from. There were many factors at play, but one of the biggest ones that I couldn't help but notice and appreciate was Dr. Omar Santana Morales. Dr. Omar Santana Morales is a local scientist in Ensenada who is actively changing the way we see sharks. There we go. Sharks and fishermen throughout the Baja region. Just 2 years ago, he asked a few fishermen he's built a strong rapport with if they would be willing to release sharks that have been caught incidentally as bycatch. He would pay them a small fee of about 320 pesos or $20 US if they sent him a video of live sharks being released from the gill nets. Once again, the fishermen were into it. They decided to do it and they agreed. And so over the course of 2 years, over 12 or so sharks have been released from gill nets. The fishermen now release these sharks without payment. They continue sending Omar videos just like this one of successful conservation efforts. Through this unique collaboration, Baja fishermen now understand the importance of white sharks as a keystone species and an apex predator. Protecting sharks protects their livelihoods. Omar has begun to recruit fishermen to assist in his white shark tagging efforts off the coast of Baja in Isla Guadalupe and Sonora. The fishermen are experts at quickly and efficiently removing the sharks without harm from these nets. They're also incredibly familiar with the sharks' migratory patterns and have much to teach the scientists. Omar and his team can successfully complete this work through direct collaboration with the artisanal fishermen. In this video here, Daniel Diaz, a fieldwork technician and my second guide throughout Baja, is placing white shark tagging receivers in Isla Guadalupe. As you can see, 2 different white sharks are in the frame. Fishermen often experience these types of condition when fishing for a prize sea scallop throughout Mexico. So because of those types of interactions, Omar plans to implement workshops and training programs where fishermen in Sonora are taught how to avoid dangerous shark interactions when they fish underwater on scuba, like the one we just saw in the video in the previous slide. Implementing a fisherman-based long-term community monitoring program where fishermen and scientists continue to work together to implement shark conservation could be an essential key to this narrative. Baja fishermen must be an essential part of the solution. It's through small mindset shifts like education, outreach, and community collaboration that can help develop and manage sustainable fishing throughout the coast of Baja. The future for sharks might seem grim, but it's people like Omar that are working to change that. Research like his has paved the way for unique partnerships and collaborations. They're all working together to conserve both sharks and the people whose livelihoods depend on them. So throughout my time here in Baja, I start to understand that the value of working in conservation lies in strengthening the relationships between coastal communities and local scientists. I've learned so much from the fishermen as they shared decades of knowledge and observations. It required listening with empathy and setting aside my biases and judgments about how I view animals in nature. For Baja's fishermen, respect for nature has always been a key part of their identity. They have protected wildlife through their local wisdom to capture not just what they wanted, but actually what they needed. The fish they catch today means they have money to buy fuel to fish tomorrow, to pay for their children's schooling, and to feed their families. Conservation can be a long and arduous journey. All of us know that here, especially when the goal is a thriving marine ecosystem and coastal community. The key is facilitating change while recognizing that it can be challenging for some of these communities to embrace. It's also a continuous learning process to understand that there are ways to proceed without sacrificing the well-being of people to achieve conservation goals. So as I drive back to San Diego, I start stitching together new conservation ideas that involve both protecting sharks and respecting the traditional fishing practices of these communities. I started drumming up new ways to teach others about my experience and share my work. So I'm in the process of pitching this story to magazines that define themselves as an exploration of climate and culture, with pieces from artists, activists, and writers all devoted to ecological and social justice, creative storytelling, and a re-enchantment with the natural world. With this piece, I hope to redefine fishermen as kind, passionate citizen scientists who absolutely deserve to be included in shark conservation. Because the more I immerse myself in this work, I realize that there is always hope and we still have time. I came to Baja in search of sharks, but I left with so much more than that. If I can convince the world of anything, it's that sharks are worth protecting, but the people catching them are worth it too. I would like to give a special thank you to my expert field guides, Omar and Daniel, as well as my amazing photographer, Loria Dandoy. She took all of these photos, minus the shark ones. And I would like to say thank you to my capstone chair, Mar, my committee members, Samantha, Davi, and Heidi. And if you would like to see my entire article, go ahead and scan that QR code and follow along for updates. Thank you so much.
It's not really a question, but it's more, I just wanted to sort of thank you for highlighting the, this sort of cooperation between the artisanal fishermen and the scientific community, and I hope that somehow in the future, this may be something that's building more momentum, but that the fishermen can benefit monetarily as well as the science community, benefiting from the information they get from them.
Yeah, I hope that too.
So when you hear about sharks right now, everything is all about they're attacking, and yet this seemed a very different presentation about sharks. So how do we, I've been in the water with sharks, but they weren't, the great white ones that are going to chop your leg off. How do we get the information out that sharks have a purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of the conservation narrative these days is on one end or the other. A lot of conservationists are out there that are trying to portray sharks as gentle and docile, and I think it's really important to remember that they are apex predators. They're keystone species, super important to the ecosystem, and hopefully pieces like these can help change that narrative.
I've got a question. Chloe, so how did you become interested in shark conservation in this part of Mexico?
Yeah, so my interest here developed because of a Scripps researcher here, one of my committee members, Davi Kasev. He is sort of our known Scripps shark expert. I knew I wanted to work locally as possible, and Baja is not too far. As you saw, it was 1,000 miles of driving down long dirt roads, but I felt especially connected to this region. I wanted to work with local scientists, and I had expert guides, Omar and Daniel, who are willing and able to they set up my entire trip. It was so great. They found the fish camps. They built a strong rapport there with fishermen, and it allowed me to have almost like an in that I otherwise wouldn't have had without their support and without the trust that they've built with these fishing communities. And so it was a really good opportunity to travel, stay close, to travel to a different place, to understand a different perspective. And that really helped shape my narrative and my conservation story that I wanted to tell.
Thanks, Chloe. And there's one more question that came in from the web, which is, how will you take your passion for shark conservation further, knowing what you know now?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I started this program, I will vulnerably admit, as a more naive conservationist. I can't say that I was all in favor of shark fishing, but now I've learned through this program that sustainable shark fishing is possible, and it is the solution to conserving sharks and conserving these coastal communities. So my hope is that this article can reach people that maybe have that more narrow mindset that I had when I started the program, and open their eyes a little bit that there is another side to the story, actually a very big side to the story. It's the fishermen that rely on the species to feed their families. And so for me, I think it's taking the story and sharing it with the world, and hopefully getting it picked up by an article or a journal would be really amazing, to be able to expand this story further and educate those that maybe don't know about this piece of the shark conservation narrative.